A2IM, the collective voice of independent music.
All right. Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Indiescussion, the relaunch for season 2. My name is Evan Plake. I'm the membership manager here at A2IM, and we've got a great one today to kind of kick the second round off on the status of live music with NIVA, or the National Independent Venue Association, discussing major roadblocks as well as lifelines for kind of everyone in the live space, including artists, labels, and venues. We've got a great cast of panelists. We're going to be moderated today by Moose, who is the executive director and co-founder of NIVA, as well as the managing partner and co-founder of Marauder, Darren Delgado, label manager over at Dirtybird, Toby Parks, owner of Des Moines, Iowa-based venue XBK, as well as the executive director of nonprofit indie label Station One Records, and Katherine Friedland, senior director of touring over at Mom+Pop Music. And before I hand it over, if you are interested in hearing more about A2IM, the work we do, and getting involved in the community, you can reach myself and the rest of the membership team at membership@a2im.org, which I will also plug in the chat. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Moose.
Thanks, Evan. I appreciate the introduction. I appreciate the time. So thanks for giving us this platform. I'm just going to quickly introduce myself, and then I'm going to ask the panelists just to give maybe a 10 to 30 second introductions of themselves as well, if possible. So like Evan said, I'm both the managing partner at Marauder and the executive director of NIVA, the National Independent Venue Association. My work on a year-round basis up until about 5 months ago has largely been about connecting people and their artists and their projects from around the world with the North American market. And we run, Marauder runs Independent Venue Week in the US, which has been an annual celebration of independent venues across the country. And now with NIVA, where our focus has been very, very much on not just organizing such a large group of venues, but also being able to help get congressional support and national protection, if you will, from so many going out of business. My role is pretty much consumed in dealing with these live venues. So I'm going to start with Toby, and maybe you can introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, thanks, Moose. So happy to be here. My name, again, is Toby Parks, and I'm owner of XBK, a small 250 cap venue in Des Moines, Iowa, and also the executive director of Station One Records, which is a nonprofit record label / artist entrepreneurship program that I started to help aid independent artists here in the Midwest. And then I also serve as the co-chair of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force for NIVA, and also serve on the lobbying committee for NIVA as well. So I'll just sort of leave the rest of it for you to talk about and ask about, Moose, but I'm glad to be here today.
Thanks. Darren?
Mute, right. Hi guys, my name is Darren Delgado. I am the label manager and talent buyer for Dirtybird and for records and also our festivals. So I manage all of our day-to-day stuff for the record label, publishing company, and then was talent buying for our festivals and shows and parties. So
Thanks. Katherine?
Hi, my name is Katherine. I run touring at Mom+Pop Music. So I'm kind of the person in between the artists and the managers and the agents and the label, and help everyone connect the dots on everything we're working at on the release end.
So I actually want to start with you, Katherine. I was wondering if you can talk about the role that live music in general plays when you're talking about artist development.
Yeah, huge, obviously. I mean, a lot of the way that we view touring at Mom+Pop is sort of like an extension of everything that we do. And we really like to look at things holistically. And so for us, touring is really, I mean, in my opinion, it's the way you win over fans. Like, it's the way you take everything that we're doing, the releasing of the music, all of the content, all of the marketing, and you really kind of put it to work, and you, you know, bring it quite literally on the road. And I mean, for developing artists, I think before you ever even have a record label, you know, that's where you learn who you are and figure out, you know, your story and where you're going. And it's so important, I think, in those early stages to be, you know, to be practicing in that way and to be kind of growing in that way to enable the next steps and to figure out, you know, how you release music, how you want to move forward, you know, with maybe a more like a label partner or managing partner. Those things tend to come down the line after live music. So for me, it's step one.
And Toby, what about with you when you're working out from the label perspective? Obviously, it's different, but from the venue perspective, I was wondering if you could talk about where you work with labels or artists to help on a developmental level.
Well, yeah, and you know, we built our venue specifically for that. I mean, going off of what Katherine said, so much about the live music experience is about, you know, creating an environment where fans can really connect with the artist and really build a rapport in a way that, you know, we always try to approach it in a way that allows the artists and the patron to be able to connect and continue that connection over time. And so we continue to build relationships with the artists and the agents and everyone to help see those artists grow and build. I mean, you know, as much as I love having a number of great upstart artists come through our venue because we are smaller, I love seeing the band that grows out of our space because of having that opportunity to tour in venues that are just like mine. You know, on the flip side of it, we consider ourselves more of a listening room kind of environment. So we're a space that we really put a lot of time and effort into our production. And so even though we're a 250 cap space, we also tried to replicate the type of production that you would see in more of a much larger size venue. You know, we like to say that, you know, we're putting an arena show in a 250 seat club. And so it's just really about the experience. And that's been the hardest thing, I think, about this is, you know, one, as a fan of music, not being able to have that experience, but also knowing a lot of the artists that have been struggling and not being able to have that space to connect with their fans and trying to figure out new and different ways to do that. But nothing is going to change the experience that you have being in a room, you know, 15 foot from your favorite act.
Darren, can you talk a little bit about some of what you've experienced, that 15 foot, you know, from your 15 feet from your favorite act? Like, how have you been able to use it from both the label and from the, you know, maybe the production standpoint to be able to help solidify careers for your artists?
Yeah, I mean, well, the Dirtybird, you know, we're primarily electronic music, which is made for the dance floor, right? So a lot of that experience and a lot of way records break in our genres is DJ so-and-so playing it at Coachella or whatever, some club or whatever, and then the club goers or party people experiencing that, and then driving the streams and the downloads and stuff. So for us, it's, you know, it's a really big connection of that live event and the music in general. And so, I mean, even we had when COVID first started, we had some quote unquote kind of harder, more like techno records, bigger dance floor stuff that we had to push back, because like, how can you release a dance floor record when everyone's in their living rooms right now? And, you know, we kind of had to switch the release schedule a bit, knowing that we weren't going to be touring or artists weren't going to be touring to play these shows. So, you know, it opened up a couple challenges, and so it's because it's so one and the same for our genre of music, especially to make work.
Do any of you feel that the live sector is different for independent artists or artists that are on independent labels versus those that would have the backing of a major label system? Like, is this something that they need more of or use differently? What's your perception?
I mean, I'll just speak from the venue owner's perspective. And, you know, we see artists come through that are, you know, signed to any number of the majors that are kind of smaller artists and those that are from the independents. And, you know, ultimately, from the fan perspective, I don't think that they know, you know. I mean, I think that it's really just about, in the live space, finding that connection, connecting with the artist, having that experience. And I mean, I think that the marketing dollars that labels can provide change that dynamic a little bit. But it really is so much, you know, the live music culture really is so much just about kind of being the road warrior and pounding the pavement and making that connection with fans that's going to be sustained over time, you know. And that's the thing, is you can continue to release records on Spotify and you can do all of that, but I don't know if you can continue that same kind of connection with your fan base without having that personal kind of, what can sometimes feel like a one-on-one sort of connection with the artist.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of, you have, you know, these independent artists where, you know, they're trying to break through and getting, you know, they're playing these local gigs and taking their equipment around to all the small venues and stuff. And like we were just talking about before the call, it's, you know, there's those things where you have these young artists that could break through in their local market. Those opportunities aren't there for them right now or for the indefinite future. And so, you know, being able to open for the opener is, you know, a billion times over is a pretty valuable thing, that to get the exposure to sell a record or to, you know, build the fan base that is gone now. And so, you know, maybe as a major label signed artist, they, like you said, they might have the marketing dollars to boost them in another way or through another vertical. But, you know, in terms of those small artists getting their breaks as like the opening DJ or whatever, you know, they have to come up with another way, unfortunately.
So let's talk about the artist specifically right now. You know, Katherine, I want to kind of start with you on this one. For a developing artist, for an artist that's maybe, you know, fresh out the gate and doesn't necessarily have that much of an audience, but you as the label believe in them and you have your methods and your plans that you go through. What are you doing now that is different than what you were doing? Like, how are you reaching that that live audience without having any live audience?
I'm glad you asked that, because one of the things we do focus on for our more developing acts is making that connection that you guys are referencing on the road. Normally, like if we can get a developing artist in a support slot and then can encourage them to spend time at the merch booth, meeting fans, making some sort of connection that's going to make that person come back for more and follow along on the journey, that's our goal then. And now we have to rethink about that. And I mean, in that way, streaming and live streaming is kind of an amazing solution, because you're able to give these people in isolation this connection and this comfort of checking in with them and giving them, you know, a peek into your art or what your day is like, depending on, you know, what kind of content you're putting out there. But people are so hungry for connection and for relationships in this moment. It's actually a unique opportunity for both, I think, developing artists and very well-developed artists to connect with their fan base at a time when they need each other. And I think it's a unique moment because fans are paying attention and they have the time and they want that from artists. So I think as a developing artist, if you can engage with your fans, you know, through your socials and through content and live streaming and really connect with them, that's actually going to make a long-term fan, and they're going to be grateful for that in the long run.
I think what you're...
Sorry, Miss, I just wanted to add something too to what Katherine was saying is, I also think that even though this time has, you know, changed the industry in a very massive way, just from, you know, sort of a structural sense, but I think that the live music industry and the music industry in general has changed forever in the way that I think fans are going to be expected in some ways to be sort of super served. And I think that live streaming is now going to be something that is a constant. That part is not going away. Venues are going to be live streaming from this day forward. Most shows, I think people are going to have that expectation that they're going to be able to tune in to a show online if they want to, and they can come in person or be able to see it elsewhere. And so I think that so much of this stuff is going to inform what the future of the industry is going to look like. And I think it's going to, I wonder if the audience is going to want more from artists going forward.
You know, live streaming's been around for years, and there's been origination fees or sponsorship fees or licensing fees or all these things that, whether it's the venue or it's the software company, have tried to add on to it. So I wonder if any of you guys are comfortable about talking about how live streaming works from a technical perspective, as far as who gets paid and from what avenue. Like, how does this fill past the exposure aspect of it? How does live streaming come into play from a business perspective?
I think, it's interesting. It's like the one door closed, another door opens with the streaming, like, because you in a way where these local bands can't get that opening gig, they can stream and they can reach thousands of people, and or a much larger audience, or people don't have to go to, it's Coachella everywhere, right? Where you don't have to go all the way across the world or get a plane ticket, and you can get that experience. But in terms of the monetization of it, yeah, it hasn't caught up to, getting paid thousands of dollars or whatever, hundreds of dollars for a gig that you're doing. So, there's the tip aspect, which we've seen. We do a weekly live stream, and we're actually launching a whole network where we have a bunch of our artists. We'll be doing like 7 to 10 shows basically on our network, and to try to get constant content. And so, we see sometimes we'll have people over the night will tip $1,000 total for tips, or, I think one of the bigger issues, and it's going to ramp up, is with the monetization aspect of it. Running a label, I know what, seeing like there's the YouTube monetization and SoundCloud monetization, but now everyone put everything on Twitch, and you have all this music being streamed up there, and there's no one getting paid for it. And so I think that's going to, that it's come to a head now, where I feel like, it's going to have to turn that model on its heads and start monetizing that. And I know it's a little bit challenged monetizing live streams, but they're going to have to figure out a way to do it, because, as a copyright holder, if you get played, you want to get paid. So I think, there's that aspect. And then I've seen some successes otherwise with some like gated stuff where you pay $1 to get in, or $5 to get in, or such like that. And I mean, again, right now, the sum of all the parts still doesn't equal that gig fee or that touring fee or whatever to make it. But hopefully it's kind of laying that foundation for monetization that will actually at some point be a tipping point, right?
I think that's my that's really the root of my question, right? Is that everything in the music industry is you have to work for nothing in order to get something down the road. And it's just kind of been accepted for many different levels, and especially from an emerging artist perspective. And certainly I'm not trying to get a resolution to that predicament from this conversation, but the illusion that because everything is available on the internet doesn't mean that everybody's going to have an audience on the internet. And so I guess, Toby, with your label, how do you help make that connection from you have an access point, which is universal, and you have an artist, which is needs to reach this infinite level of audience? How do you actually do it? Is it only performing for free? Is it only existing fans that are paying for it?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I think that it is a complicated thing. I mean, one, in some ways, like, that's just the conundrum of the music industry right now, is that, we've had a democratization of the industry where anybody can get a track up on Spotify, right? Anybody can put a video up on YouTube. And so it's everybody, how do you get your artist noticed, period, in that world and in that space? And that, when we talked about having a label, I think that that's kind of where, larger indie labels or a major can really help kind of cut through the clutter. For us, one of the things that we instill with the artists that we work with at Station One is to know your value, to really understand that your art has value, no matter how many people try to tell you that you shouldn't, that you should, back in the days when we were playing shows, that, you should play for free drinks or a meal or something. And, in some ways that might work if you're, getting to open for a larger size band or whatever, and it puts you in a different position. But, generally, all artists should go in and understanding that, you spend hours cultivating your art. You spend thousands of dollars in equipment. You deserve to be paid for that. How we do that in this model, I don't know. What we've always told our artists is, get out on the road, meet your fans, and that's the conundrum that we're really trying to work through, because, a lot of our artists, because they are smaller, are working with their fan base, and how do you start kind of getting into other spaces? And there are other things that have happened, like, I know that there's some online stuff happening, say on Facebook or Instagram, where there are groups that are trying to have like online shows that are free that people can kind of tune into. I will say one of the differences are that our artists are doing more kind of localized shows in different markets. Like one of the artists that we did a volunteer show for a retirement home in Florida, here from Des Moines, so it's like she could do this thing, and all of these folks in Florida were seeing her. So there's these kind of different ways of doing it, but I think that we're all still trying to kind of figure that out. Like, how do you make money, and how do you continue to build a fan base in a world where you can't, I still think the music industry is about connection, and it's all about having that intimate experience with them, and that's hard to do when you can't just meet new people. And
Toby, I'm sorry for cutting you off, but you mentioned something. You phrased it differently, but I want to kind of dig in on this. What is the touring possibility in a socially distanced world? Like, how are people touring right now? What is the equivalent of touring, and how do artists do that for themselves?
I mean, some of the things that we've done is, takeovers of their friends. Like, how a lot of times, like, smaller bands will start by doing tours with their friends, or they'll, I'm here in Chicago and you're in Minneapolis, and we'll just swap shows, and we'll, trade on each other's fan bases. And so some of the things that we've been doing with our artists is, find those same bands and, take over their Instagram and do your live set there, and then vice versa, and trying to build things that way. Katherine, I don't know if you have, you may have more experience there, but.
Yeah, I mean, that's truly exactly what I was going to get to, which is, I think, collaborating with your community of artists and finding other artists that you can say, okay, I'm doing a Monday night series. Will you join my Monday night series? And vice versa, let's switch to yours over there, and trying to communicate with each other's fan bases and really using each other's platform to support each other. And if a developing artist could find 5 artists that they could collaborate with on, like, via socials, whether it's an interview, chat with each other, or play each other's songs for a night, or you can think really creatively, and hopefully that audience will translate over, and you can help encourage that. And maybe that is something that you can do in the meantime when it's hard to do what we would all say to do, which is get on the road and meet your fans and make new fans. So that's a recommendation that I think I would start.
Yeah, we encourage that too, where like the tour now is like you're touring people's live stream shows, right? Like, and so, and also I think a big part of it too, I mean, people go out to the venues and stuff for the experience, and obviously the live stream doesn't recreate the experience, but it should recreate some experience. So, someone might be on the cooking streaming show, but someone might be on the modular synthesizer show. But so the idea is that you can provide experience besides just a camera and playing music, and try to hopefully a lot of different experiences within that, and to make it unique, to bring that experience into, through the screen, which is a huge challenge, right? To give them something that they can actually like enjoy and sit and stare at for an hour or 2 or 3.
I don't think anything is going to be able to replace the live music venue experience. And I think the people that will succeed are the people that realize that there's something that they will give in their live show, and there's something that they're going to give in this digital relationship that might be unique and separate and different. And maybe it's also performance based, but it'll always be different. And I think the people that kind of lean into those differences are the people that are maybe going to actually be inspired by this new medium of way to communicate with fans and connect.
Could one of you talk about the economics of this? I mean, if you're touring, if you're in a band, you're making a guarantee, or you have a door split, you have merch, like you have all these different mechanisms, and then there's people that are taking their cut from various different positions, and it could be a merch percentage, or it could be, you know, the opening band being paid out, or whatever it is. But everything that we've kind of talked about here seems to me like it would fall in the realm of having a virtual tip jar or a ticketed stream of some kind. I wonder if one of you is comfortable talking about either alternative income streams from doing the live streaming aspect of things, or who else is involved, who's paying licensing fees, who's getting a percentage, if anybody, because I think like the iPhone in somebody's living room is different than some of the scenarios that have been discussed here. I'm wondering if you can talk about those other scenarios.
I can speak a little bit to like the gated ticketing thing that we've been doing. The way that we've been doing it is like an announce goes live, an artist points to, you know, their website or a landing page where you collect, where you sell tickets as you would for a show typically. And then prior to that performance, you deliver the link to like a gated stream. And in that sense, the money is going to the artist. Sometimes there's a fee on top of it, depending on if you're using a specific platform to help you sell those tickets. Or if you're co-promoting with somebody else or enlisting the promotional marketing help of a local promoter or venue or whatever it may be, then they might get a cut of the tickets that are sold via their unique link and things like that. And it's actually, for us, I mean, Mom+Pop does not take money in touring. And so the artists have been keeping that money and using it, you know, to support also their crews and things like that. That's sort of been the flow of how we've done the ticketed, the gated ticketed live streams.
For us, like for, you know, if we get donations for our shows, I mean, we were just really kind of donating it back to, you know, so there's some of our artists or some of, you know, there's a lot of these younger artists that they had 40, 50 dates booked, you know, and they were making great. I mean, there's no reason, you know, their calendar's been full for years. They have a full calendar for 2020 and literally their income streams overnight. So a lot of the money that we give it back. And I was even kind of talking with some of the larger artists where, you know, I mean, really big artists that are doing really well, and their income stream's gone too, but there also is that perception of if they do it and they keep the profits, there's almost like a negative connotation there. So they feel that they have to donate it themselves, and they want to give it back to the younger artists, even though they're struggling just as much. But I think a lot of it right now is helping as many people as we can with the little bit of money that is trickling in to try to help everyone, because it's not just one person. It's everyone here is kind of hurting, and it's going to take a really big group effort and a whole slew of funds to really kind of make all these people actually, you know, put a roof over their head.
And I'll speak from the venue side of things. We've done sort of a mix of all of those. We've done some of the gated shows where, you know, the venue would get a piece of, you know, whatever that ticket fee is. And most of the time we just turn around and donate that back to the artist, because from the venue side, it's not like those artists are exactly in our venue doing the performance, which is different than us using our promotional platform to help promote this artist live stream and getting a piece of it. And, you know, and running a facility it costs a lot of money, you know, and so if we're selling even, you know, 50, 60, 100 tickets, if we're only getting, you know, 10% of that, that's not making that much of a dent in what we need, but that is a meal for the artist that is doing that live stream, you know, and so we've basically donated all of those things. In terms of the facility itself, we've done some things where we've collaborated with other organizations within our city to do live streams. So we have something called the Civic Music Association here in Des Moines, and they've done some live streams from our venue, and they basically pay a reduced rental fee that basically just covers the cost of our sound guy. And then they will stream from our space. So, you know, we look at this moment from a venue, and it's kind of an interesting twist on things. Our venue looks at this as more of a marketing opportunity for us. We're relatively new. So to the extent that we keep our name in circulation and keep up-serving content to the fans of our venue, that's a benefit to us during this time. And so, you know, we're sitting on an empty building. So as much as we can do to just continue to do stuff, we are, and not as concerned about the bottom line at this point, and just trying to make sure everybody is surviving.
Mhm.
Yeah, it really feels like the music community as a whole has not necessarily turned into the haves and the have-nots, but kind of the have a little and willing to help those that have nothing. And I mean, certainly from the communities that I've tried to surround myself with, that seems to be what the independent scene is more or less about to begin with. But it is still a business, and that business has been disrupted so dramatically that it requires everybody to make concessions in a way that they might not otherwise have had to make.
Yeah.
Darren, I wonder if you can talk about what you're planning towards in the future, right? Are you planning on doing in-person events? Are you planning on doubling down for streaming? What are your plans?
Yeah, I mean, definitely doubling down for streaming. And my neighbor just decided to do a chainsaw right now, so if you hear a chainsaw, but we're doubling down on streaming. As he said, we're kind of starting this network of a bunch of artists that are, doing individual weekly shows to kind of build our network, and then we definitely plan on doing all of our live shows next year. I mean, not all of them, but we want to start getting back, because again, it's that live connection is what it is what makes this music. So I don't know if that's going to be in 2021 or if it's going to be in 2022. But we have to look forward to that. It has to come back at some point, since this is what we're all doing it for. And, and so we're optimistic about it, that we can make it happen, but it's going to be a long road for sure. I mean, we've already pushed 2 albums back that were going to come out this year, because it was going to be based on a tour. So our release schedule has changed drastically this year. So it trickles down throughout everything. So.
Sure, but what does that mean, right? Because everybody's pushing records back. The majors are certainly pushing records back.
Mm-hmm.
Katherine, from where you stand, are we just going to be waiting until the world reopens, and then we're going to have an onslaught of all these amazing records that nobody has time to spend time with, or no rooms are open yet to play in?
So in the beginning, I think people were like, we have to push, right? And then kind of the unfortunate reality set in that there isn't going to be this end date where this is the end of this era and we're back to normal life. And in that sense, I think when artists they create it for a moment in time, and it might not be the moment they imagined, but it is still kind of this era of their lives, and they do want to creatively move on. And I think some things are being the strategy is being rethought, and maybe the timelines are being adjusted, but I think largely our music is still coming out, Some of it did get pushed. Absolutely. It was planned around specific tours that weren't happening, and it is going to be prolonged. But I think the music is still coming out, and I also wouldn't be surprised if there was an onslaught of 1 million albums at the same time, because everyone is writing. At least from my perspective, they have this time that they never accounted for, and I think there will be a lot of new music. And the challenge to keep up with the vacancy of the rooms and how to book tours that support current music is something that it's on my mind. How is it going to exactly?
Well, yeah, Katherine, to your point, I think that a couple of different things. One, I also work as an attorney for a couple of major labels, actually. And, I think that there was initially, when this started, I think that there was a lot of concern about how do you promote music when we're in a national crisis, right? And then kind of got through that. And then we had a lot of the racial tension that opened the door. And then suddenly it's well, what do we do now? It seems pretty trite to release your new single that may not be talking about really anything. And yet, we have protests happening in the streets. And I think that as we go through this time that has been really difficult for a lot of different people in a lot of different constituencies, it's going to make it even harder, I think, for artists to try and figure out the timing to release stuff. But I think that we also have to figure out how to walk and chew gum at the same time, right? And so I think, to Katherine's point, I think artists are needing to kind of move on creatively and get work out there. And I think that people are just going to continue to put it out as they can. From the venue side, I'll say that what concerns me most specifically about smaller independent artists is right now, we've got holds in our venue for, spring of 2022 right now. We have things that we had to reschedule from this spring going into fall of 2021. And so once things do become more able to open, and who knows exactly when that's going to be, but it's going to be much more difficult, I think, for independent artists or younger artists to kind of find a stage, and so I think that then even too, the streaming stuff will become even more of a component in some ways for them, because it may be what they have to work with for a while until, a lot of the stages are a bit more free.
Toby, could you go into a bit more detail as far as what independent venues are doing right now and what the reality is for independent venues in the landscape, and what that means for independent artists and labels?
Yeah. Right now, all independent venues are struggling to survive. My venue in particular, we haven't had revenue since March 11th when our doors closed. And, for the venues, we were the first businesses to close, and we will be the last businesses to reopen when this pandemic, when we get through it. And we're not going to be able to effectively reopen in any real sort of way until we do have a vaccine. Even, opening in a position that, like right now, say in Iowa, I'm allowed to reopen my venue, but we have to put in social distance protocols. And so for us, we're a 250 cap space. The moment that we do that, our capacity goes down to 54. There's no way that we're going to effectively be able to pay our staff, run the room, do all of those things, and then have 54 tickets to sell, and then be able to effectively pay the artists to do something. It just is not feasible. So what a lot of venues have come together as part of the National Independent Venue Association, there's about 2,600 of us now lobbying the federal government for aid, not only for the venues themselves, but aid and opportunities, at least for businesses and industries that are most impacted by this pandemic and that are going to be suffering much longer term devastation. So, one of the things that we've really tried to do to impress upon our federal legislators is we've done a very quick education of what the music industry is, and particularly the live music industry, because, I think a lot of people thought, the moment that there's a vaccine or the moment that things become a little bit more okay to try and reopen, that it's like, okay, you just turn the key on the music venue and you can open right up and business is as usual. And that's not the case. It's going to take another, 3, 4, 6 months before we're back in a place where we have shows every night like we were pre-pandemic. And so we have to figure out ways to try and get help. And I think the only way that independent venues are really going to survive is if we have some sort of federal aid to help us get there. And if we're able to do that, then that leaves a little bit more opportunity for venues to also, we can bring in our employees to do things. We can, maybe some of our management team that we've furloughed during this closure, we can bring them in and start working on some things. Allow artists to, maybe be able to pay them to come in and play to those 54 people and pay them. It may not be the normal rate, but it would be more than what they would make if they were just doing a door deal, and try and find ways to kind of string it together and to help everybody within the ecosystem. And that's really what we're fighting for at NIVA, is just to try and find some grounding and something that we can do to help support the entire ecosystem that we're working with.
Thanks, Toby. I wonder if Darren or maybe Katherine, whichever one of you feels comfortable, if you could talk about how you feel this crisis is going to change touring for the future. When there is another side, whether that comes slowly or quickly, how do you feel this is going to affect touring?
Drastically. I think you're not going to have those people doing these crazy world tours, and they're going to be much more local and stuff like that. And also, I think a lot of the the backlash is going to have to change too, where, you know, you see some of these things like the Chainsmokers played or so-and-so did a show and people are bashing them right now because, you know, we almost need to have that cultural shift where it's got to be okay for artists to perform again instead of getting blackballed or that. So, you know, it's like it has to, it not only does it have to be safe, but then the culture has to kind of accept that we are doing these socially distant shows. We have these artists coming that are doing it and to support it rather than ostracize them, you know. So
something I'm kind of interested in is you have to imagine that when venues can reopen, there still may not be travel, right? There still may not be touring between cities, but there will be local shows. So I am interested to see how the local communities and music scenes develop in those moments where every band is kind of playing their own city, every artist is staying internal to their community and not traveling around. And I don't know what that will mean, but that's not something we've seen for a very long time. And I'm curious kind of to see what effect that has on the local music scenes and the music that ends up coming out of it. And, you know, that moment between, you know, no touring and the return to touring where live shows are actually happening.
And like you said, I mean, everyone's using this as an opportunity to kind of write and recollect, and you know, they're more likely to run into their friend from down the neighborhood than they are to see somebody in the green room on tour. So it might come out some really cool collaborations.
Yeah.
And also, like, you know, like Toby said, if you have 54 people, like, is there going to be then this premium market too, where now it's like you're selling, you know, only a certain aspect of the society can go to these shows because those 54 tickets are now going for $500 a piece instead of $200 for $5 a piece. You know what I mean? Like, what the economics still definitely has not been worked out in terms of how that is going to actually be sustainable for sure.
Yeah. Well, and that's a struggle that, you know, we as a venue have had, because we've talked a lot about that of, you know, we can do something to where there is a certain echelon of people that, you know, you can bring them in and you can do a seated show and you can do something that's, you know, kind of mellow, and people will pay a premium to do that. But we as a venue have committed to be more open to the community and wanting to be, I mean, that's sort of the joy of the live music space too, is it's a place where anybody can go. And so it's, you know, for those of us that think in very socially conscious ways, that becomes a lot more complicated to navigate. But it may be something that we have to explore in order to continue to survive too, because, you know, even if independent venues are able to get aid from the federal government, we don't know how long this is going to last, you know, and so they're not going to continue to help us out. So we have to figure out some other ways to make things work. And then I think some of the other things that, for venues, at least, and Katherine, you're talking about what's happening more on the local level. Locally, the independent venues here, at least in Des Moines, and I think that it's happening elsewhere too, in large part because of the work that people have been putting into NIVA. But we have a much closer connection now to our other independent venues in our markets and in our regions. You know, with NIVA, everybody's kind of put into precincts, and, you know, we are working and communicating on a daily basis with the venues in our precincts in ways that we never did before. And I think that, you know, I think it will be a huge benefit to independent artists now that the independent venues have more communication and are working together in ways, like, not in an antitrust sort of way, but like being able to turn people on to new artists and things too. You know, if the fact of, you know, if Dana Frank, who owns First Avenue, has a really great artist that's a new artist in Minneapolis and is just blown away, now we're friendly. She may just send me a text to say, hey, Toby, you know, you're 150 miles away from us. You really need to book this act. And I think that will, I think that sort of camaraderie is going to really help the independent scene once we get through this, the big bulk of pain that we have to go through right now.
Yeah, I mean, you know, previous to this, it was very much, I think, you know, if this guy wouldn't book you, maybe call that person down the street, and that was the extent of a referral you would potentially get. And now I think because there is this community that's more active and engaged, if something comes your way and you're full or it's not appropriate, you actually know who to refer them to, and you can do so in good faith and not just pass the buck in some manner. One of the questions that came up, and certainly if any of the other participants have questions, please drop them into the Q&A. One of the questions came up was specifically about virtual reality or augmented reality. Is that being put into play with the programs you're doing? Is that something that can be, if it's not already being done? Where do you see that parlaying in with live performances right now?
Oh, go ahead, Katherine.
No, please go ahead. Yeah.
Well, we actually just started talking about it. We've been looking into some different technical options, and the general manager of our venue is a big gamer, and so we've looked at trying to do some incorporation of gaming kind of stuff into some of the things that we've been doing. And I think that there's certainly a space for it. I think that it gets a little bit more complicated in that, there are also the legal ramifications to that, and there's a lot of licensing things that are involved in ways that are a little bit different than just somebody sitting on their couch playing, an acoustic guitar. But I think that that's definitely something that people are starting to explore in a more serious way.
I mean, we're participating that, we try to do this Minecraft thing, or the organizer tried to do this Minecraft event where, there was like 500 artists and whatever, and we had this a Dirtybird camp out stage, and I mean, on paper and actually it was actually a great idea. Like, they built these Minecraft stages. Every promoter had a stage. We curated 60 artists, I think, over the course of 3 stages. It was, you bought a ticket, $7 ticket to the festival, and you can go explore the stages. Unfortunately, it wasn't executed properly, but I feel like it's kind of a preview of what is possible of you seeing these things, of these gaming and stuff like that, where it actually could be where people can interact virtually. Like, that you can play games, you can do, people were able to do archery on our stage and be able to go from the bass house or bass lodge to the birdhouse, and so you can kind of get that experience, which it's still a ways out. And I think some people like Travis Scott or Marshmello, these guys have been able to do it and quite successfully, and I think you're probably going to start seeing a lot more of that for sure.
Can you imagine having archery at a live event, like with a performance stage and drinking and everything else that goes with it?
We actually do at our camp out, so
of course you do.
No waivers, so
perfect.
You're way more brave than me.
Right.
One of the other questions I was asked is, what permanent changes to live music do you think COVID has created? What new standardized practices can we expect to stay for good once live music does eventually come back?
Checks, like temperature checks, testing. I mean, when we thought we were going to go through with the Florida show, our camp-in show, we had come up with the whole plan of self-isolation, testing. People had to pre-test. I mean, so depending on what the show is, and especially if you're going to like Coachella or something for 3 days, where you're going to be living with people and stuff, there's got to be some other protocols that are going to happen prior to that. So I think at least on that level, for sure, you're going to start seeing those natural things, just like you do at the airport, right? Where you just get your temperature check. And I think that's going to transcend over to the live space for sure.
Yeah, I would agree that, there's that. There's also other practices. I mean, I do think that it's going to take a while for people to want to be in close proximity to people that they don't know and be in that close space for a very long time. So I think that we are likely going to see, maybe we won't be at 54, maybe we'll be at 75 or 85 for a while until people get more comfortable being a little bit closer. But I think that a lot of those shows where people are sort of packed in like sardines, I think a lot of that is going to be a long, long time, I think, before we see that scene again. Well, I don't know. Actually, I guess we have seen it in some contexts already, so maybe not. But I know for us as a venue, I mean, just some of the liability concerns that we think about as a business, and just wanting to make sure that our patrons feel comfortable, and I think that we are taking a lot of our cues from our staff and from the folks that are coming into our space, and how to navigate the future.
Katherine, what does this mean as far as from the label perspective? What permanent changes do you anticipate?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all have the same goal. Like, we want to protect the community. We have a responsibility to keep artists safe. And, you know, I don't think any of us want to recommend a tour before it's safe for our artists, you know, and their fans. And we would hate to put anybody at risk, and we don't want to jump the gun and, you know, have people in an uncomfortable situation, or have, you know, crews that feel uncomfortable. And that's our priority, I think. And I think we're gonna have to take our time and see how it happens. But ultimately, all those measures that do sound kind of crazy now, you know, if they can make people feel more comfortable, then we're ready to embrace them.
Well, and I think that things like maybe meet and greets are going to look a little bit different in the future. I don't think it's going to be the same thing. Katherine, I don't know if you want to speak to that or.
No, I mean, I can't imagine that, you know, everyone's going to get to hug their favorite artist, you know, for an extra couple dollars. There's going to be limitations in, you know, in the access, and I'm sure there's going to be on our side, on the industry side, different ways that you're going to get to be in the venue. You're not going to get to hang out all after and be backstage, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of, you know, changes to how we all move throughout the venues, and, you know, how that works. So
I just imagine like a whole bunch of people letting out a sigh of relief as soon as you said artists would have to give less hugs.
Yeah, right. All the artists probably.
Yeah. Devin, could you talk about you know, maybe the ramp up period that you're talking with your artists and your events that you're working on, as far as what you're looking, and how that differs for both the US based artists or those that are not necessarily based in the US?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's still kind of touch and go. I mean, we have a lot of international artists, you know, that we signed to the label and that we work with, and, you know, they're starting to do a few shows over there. I mean, they handled it much better, I think, outside of the US, so that they are able to do a few of these shows and start getting out there again. Unfortunately for us in the US, it feels like we're going backwards a bit more. So, you know, it's hard for us to plan specific dates for. I mean, we did have our first date on the calendar of May of we moved at one of our shows, but again, it's still kind of touch and go, where you're constantly monitoring the situation. And, you know, and like Katherine said, you don't want to put your fans in danger. It's all about being safe. And, you know, besides putting them in danger, could be a lot of repercussions the other way of, if you do put them in danger, where you might not come back from that. So it's important for us to be very aware and to be very protective of you know, the people that we interact with and our fans that they come to shows. And it for the international, it feels like they're doing something a little bit better, slowly opening and doing weirdly interesting shows. Like I saw, I guess this guy played in a park, and they had like you know, these individual stages where they could put 5 people on the stage, and they were spread out 6 feet apart, and it was in a big field at a big performance. So yeah, I mean, and that all goes into planning and programming the actual festival itself, the grounds, like how do the doors work, and, you know, how are you moving people through all these or through all of these, you know, levels of stages and backstage, and you know, ticketing gates and food vendors and stuff like that. So lots of moving parts that all have an independent role that has to be looked at all the time.
Toby, from a booking perspective, I think that the general advice that anybody would give to an independent artist is build the relationship, say hello, go to a show, introduce yourself. But from what everyone is saying here, for an unestablished independent artist, you're basically looking like a year down the road at this point for that first show, and that's a best case scenario. Right. So what can a truly independent artist that doesn't have a booking agent, that doesn't have a manager, that doesn't have a label, what can they do with this downtime to help set the stage down the road? Like, how can they, what can they be doing?
I mean, I think that it's, you know, in that regard, I think it still stays the same. And as sad as it may sound, like, build your socials, you know, I mean, that's kind of where we're all at. And, you know, the first thing that we do when we get a new artist request is, you know, we go to Spotify and we go to YouTube and we go to their social media pages and kind of see fan engagement in our market and those kinds of things. And so, you know, again, do what you can do to build that base. And then also, honestly, spend the time to work on your craft, get better. You know, like, you have space and you have time, and really take your time with, you know, just developing as an artist and getting better at your work. And I think that that's kind of the things that we're looking at right now. You know, honestly, like I said, so much of what our future in the next year is going to look like is really rebooking everything that we've had in the last 6 months. So, you know, and continue to reach out. I think that, you know, right now actually might be a good time to reach out to some of the venues that you've wanted to play, only in that we're not being bombarded by 175,000 emails a day by other artists wanting to play. So, you know, shoot a note and be like, hey, I'm working on this record, or, you know, that kind of, you know, I may not necessarily be the best test case, because I'm also the person who tries to respond to every single person who emails me too. So, you know, I don't know, like, I like engaging with people that way, but
yeah, but Toby, just to cut you off, because you are a new venue, I was wondering if you can actually say, in March, how many incoming emails were you getting on a daily or weekly basis, just even as a new venue?
Probably at least 75 on a daily basis, you know? And so it's, and when things start to open up, it's going to be even worse. So I think that right now is the time where there is some downtime to, you know, that it's probably cut down to, you know, I might get 30 emails related to the venue now per day. And not all of them are necessarily booking related, but a lot of people are just trying to reach out. But I would also say, make the personal connection, like those emails that are just sort of mass emails of, like, you know, lots of capital letters and a bunch of links and stuff into something like that. I really don't really read those, to be perfectly honest. I would just reach out and find out about my venue in the same way that, you know, if you're trying to go on a date with somebody, we're trying to build a relationship, right? So find out a little bit of something about my venue. We're not just a place to just show up and play. You know, we want to help you build a career with you. And so, you know, do more of a personal outreach would be my suggestion.
What does this mean in terms of A&R, right? You know, because everybody's told time and time again, obviously the socials are important, more important now than they've ever been, and the numbers are important. But there's always that, like, well, I can't wait to see you live conversation. So what does this mean when you're talking about dealing with labels, with the lack of live performances?
Yeah, I mean, that's, I mean, for us, it's a bit different, because it always comes down to the music first, and you know, if they can perform, that's great. But you know, you have to look at a lot of other factors, unfortunately, besides the live show. I mean, again, it's a challenge. It's more of the challenge in, like, kind of trying to break a record, because, like I said, it a lot of times, at least in our genre, you know, a record breaks because so and so played it at the perfect time at a moment, and the whole dance floor heard it, and they're all going to play it, and it just snowballs. So for us, the challenge has been trying to find what's the thing that's, you know, that breaks a record, so to speak, nowadays. You know, or if someone performed the show, you know, this new song at Coachella or Lollapalooza, like, how do you recapture that moment where, you know, you can expose to amounts of people in that same spirit, right? Where like, this song is it, and I have to find more of it. So that's definitely become a huge, massive challenge.
Well, thank you. And I know we're out of time, so I just want to say thank you quickly to Katherine and Darren and Toby for being so generous with their time. And I also want to say, if you are interested in not just learning more about the fight for that independent venues and promoters are going through, but also adding your voice, you can go to saveourstages.com. And if this is your first foray into A2IM, I would urge you to dig a bit deeper. I'm a huge, huge fan and a dual status member of A2IM. Membership at a2im.org is what Evan was posting earlier. And thank you to Evan as well for being able to orchestrate this. So Evan, I'm going to turn this back over to you. Thank you for being so gracious with the
That's
space.
good. I think you did most of my outro work. So again, thank you, Moose. Thank you, Toby, Katherine, and Darren for the incredibly insightful, informative, and super candid conversation. Again, as Moose said, if you're interested in getting more involved with anything A2IM, hear more about our work and what we do, you can reach the membership team at membership@a2im.org. And with that, I think I will sign out. So thank you again. And
you guys, appreciate it. Pleasure to meet you, Toby and Katherine.
Yeah, you too, man. You too.